THA Talks, for free thought and open minds.
And for freedom of speech.
Hello, I'm Paul Obitelli and welcome to another edition of THA Talks, the alternative podcast show from the UK. Our talks include news, conspiracies, spirituality, the occult, science, history, art, philosophy, religion, and much more. If you'd like to check out our full archive, just go to www.thatalks.com to listen to or to download all our free content. And if there's anyone who'd like to contact us and give us some feedback, or maybe you'd like to recommend a guest for the show, you can email us info@thatalks.com. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the show via our RSS feed, and you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, and many other podcast directories out there. Hello, welcome to THA Talks again. It's good to be back. I did enjoy the talk I'd done with John Wyatt last week. Massive things going on with the American election, and we're seeing that unfold as we move towards the end of the year. I think it's massive what's going on, because I think either there's going to be a huge exposing of a certain political establishment that we're going to see, which is going to change the way we look at politics, to be honest, if it's true, or this whole movement in America, this Trump and his legal team are really sticking their necks out, and they could end up losing them. That's how I see it. It's really big, and I just hope it goes to court and we get to hear this all, and it's played out very fairly. Because something tells me it's going to be big one way or the other. I just hope we don't see one of these things where the evidence is played out and everyone knows what's happened. Everyone can see it. The evidence is there. But yet we still see some really dodgy court ruling, like we've seen recently with the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp case, where there's been audio recordings showing how terrible she was to him. And yet, because there was a video where he slammed a few doors in there, shelves in the cupboards in the kitchen, and he was, you're an abuser. And that, you can go on YouTube and check that yourself, and anyone with a brain can see what that relationship was all about, what was going on there. But no, he's appealing, mind you. But it just goes to show sometimes our courts are just a bit dodgy themselves, and so it's really up in the air, and we're going to be covering it, no doubt. It's going to be really intriguing. But today we're not going to be talking about that. We're going on to something a bit more mystical, historical. And I'm not going to say too much more about it. I'm going to bring in the one and only Rev David Parry. How are you doing, David?
Oh, my God. Good evening, Obitelli. How are you? Always a blast to speak to you and be on the show. Yeah, it's hanging quite hard. Things are together, so I can't moan. I'm getting sick of this pointless lockdown, along with nearly everybody else, I think. But, it's given me the chance to reflect on where the various projects are going, and of course arrange this groundbreaking conference. Well,
yeah, it's I like the way you're keeping busy. You haven't let this this lockdown sort of hold you back in terms of you're still making arrangements. You've managed to squeeze certain things in, and now you're sort of planning for this hopefully next year, when this really strange lockdown that doesn't seem to make sense at all is out of the way. Hopefully, we're in that position. You've got a really interesting conference lined up for it, and it's the Nephilim and Anthropology conference.
Yeah, don't get me on the lockdown, because we'd be here for hours. Even the World Health Organization has changed its tune and is now saying that this is unhealthy, and they're still doing it. Well, it's absolutely bewildering what's happening in Britain, of all places, at the moment. A mature democracy which should know 10 times better than it's actually doing.
It's basically, all over the world, no matter what rules they've got in different countries, different lockdowns, no lockdown, lockdown, mask wearing, no mask wearing, all across the world. It doesn't seem to have made a real difference anywhere, really. It's tended to have the same trend in what it's doing, whatever we do. And it's I don't know. It's I think when it first started, it was just these so-called tin hat wearing conspiracy nuts. People were rolling their eyes. I think if anything we can take good from this, I think a lot of people have opened their eyes now and thought, you know what, maybe those tin hat wearing people, maybe they've got a point. I think that's what we can take from this. I think.
Well, I think some of them always had a point. I mean, there are conspiracy theorists and there are conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
And some of them actually have proven to have a real finger in the pie.
Yeah.
Not that pleases me at all. I find that very disturbing. But credit where it's due, and we've got to admit some of them are in the right.
In a way, I think where we are now with this, and it's what you're doing, and I think this is the approach we've got to have, is to not allow them to change our way of life, our culture, and the way as human beings we like to live. I think we've got to be very stubborn and remember how things were before, carry on as normal, and that's exactly what you're doing, because this conference is a typical Rev David Parry conference. You've covered subjects like this in the past, and you're never afraid to sort of go back to them. So what's the inspiration behind this one?
Oh, bless you. I mean, it's strange to think that these ancient and esoteric subjects can have such relevance for today. I mean, I've got two major plans for next year: the Nephilim conference and my own one-man show, The Art and Drama of Beowulf, which I don't want to talk about yet because it's next November. So, there's a lot of planning to do yet. But certainly in terms of the Nephilim conference, I mean, Nephilim is just the Jewish word for giants. Why is it Jewish? Because it's from the Bible. I wanted that particular angle for the simple reason, not only being a minister, but also they've got a really interesting prehistory of the giants and giantism. A heathen would call them Jotuns. They're known by various names across the world, but the idea is that there was a time in the mists of antiquity when human beings weren't the only dominant species. I mean, they were being picked upon by a race, by an ethnicity of giants who were cannibals.
Before, just to stop you there before you carry on, what I find interesting, just to clarify, while we're on the subject of the word, like we said, Jotun, that was the North mythology that had the giants, Jotun, which are called giants. But that translation, if I'm not mistaken, the word giants really was translated from a word that was more like, was it eaters or consumers?
Yeah.
So is that the same with the Nephilim and those type of translations, or does it differ in that area?
Paul, I'm amazed to say this, and I'm coming at it from an arts angle, from Dada, from the surreal, from the imaginative sciences, the imaginative arts, which is my inspiration. But you can't help noticing certain things. That this race, for want of a better word, of giants were cannibals, and they had voracious appetites for human beings, which is very, very, very interesting indeed. I love, and the stories began to connect up for me a couple of years ago. They were nearly the same types of stories in North Europe as they were in Israel, as they were in Africa, as they were in China, as they were in Russia. And you're beginning to look at the picture of an ancient sort of pre-world world, a pre-world planet Earth, where the atmosphere was different, where the gravity was different, and these beings are the leftovers of what was before. In the Bible, we're taught that that basically the angels put a curse on this earth, and limitation as opposed to expansion became the order of the day. And people hardly talk about what the world would have been like pre-curse. But you can put certain things together, where giantism would have been the norm at one point. An absolutely fascinating anthropological aspect to all of this. I mean, certainly one of the most mysterious chapters in the Bible, books in the Bible, forgive me, is Genesis 6, which talks about those who fly above. Now, I notice in the original, they're not using the word angeloi. Every single time the word angel is mentioned in the Bible, is either angeloi in Greek or a derivative. For once, possibly the only time that word isn't used. Therefore, you've got this mysterious group of beings flying above the earth, the Watchers. And they, for their own reasons, whatever they are. So remember, we're not talking about anything angelic per se. We're talking about something else. Descend to the earth, and they saw that the daughters of earth were comely, and they took them unto wife. So there was interbreeding, and of course the Nephilim are the beings that emerge from that unnatural. That's not a word I like to throw around, because it either means something bigger than most human minds can take, or it means something trivial. Anything that can happen within nature is natural, but they're implying in these stories that something that simply should not have occurred took place. And a race of giants was born from this union, from this unholy wedlock. And of course, these giants, Nephal, they are fallen. They are from the fallen ones. Decide to not only spread knowledge given to them by their celestial parents, but also start dominating the earth and making war with humankind. Certainly in scripture, they're called Nephilim, they're called Rephaim. They come from a number of directions, but you're looking at giantism and what the giants did in that part of the world to the children of Israel, which of course is analogous to stories of giants, even amongst the ancient Native Americans, and the way, they address that subject over there. I mean, certainly, this nonsense, the Native Americans used to say how to each other. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I think probably the evidence is that they didn't. Certainly they raised their hands to each other, and it seems to be based on whether they had 5 fingers or not. And then it links to other weird stuff. Like these giants, at least certain species of them, were meant to have 2 rows of teeth. They were meant to have 6 fingers. And their predilection was to prey upon human beings as their favourite food source. Our good Lord himself is asked, what will be a sign of the end? And he says something very, very cryptic. As it was in the days of Noah, so will it be in the end, at the beginning of the end. And of course, that is an oblique reference not only to those who fly above, but also their offspring, whether that's an offspring of AI, whether that's an offspring of genetic experimentation gone horribly wrong, or maybe the re-emergence of this forbidden species themselves, that the giants somehow return to Earth. Don't know what you think of all that, Obertelli.
Well, I mean, it's definitely fascinating. There's so many layers to it, and there'll be so many opinions. One thing that strikes me is if you look in ancient history, there's a trend of basically generally animals were bigger. Like you get these huge snakes or these huge sharks that lived in the ocean, huge wolves and bears, and obviously the dinosaurs were huge lizards. So it's not inconceivable that you had huge apes, and it's not inconceivable that you had huge apes that were a bit more evolved than others, like human beings are now. So the concept of there being giant humans really isn't that far-fetched. It's just a case of finding the evidence there. And what you've been talking about, there's certainly something to stir up interest and thought about it. That's the way I see it. That's one thing that I do find. I mean, I was really into this subject many years ago when I first started hearing about it, and you see lots of pictures online. These guys were digging up these bones, and you see this huge skull. A lot of them were debunked as photoshopped, and of course people have a field day with stuff like that. And that's one of the problems nowadays we have, is the internet and Photoshop and technology is so good, be it UFOs, Bigfoot or giants or anything like that. It's so easy to make fake videos that it's almost like made it harder now, where you would have thought it made it easier because there's videos everywhere. It's difficult what to believe anymore. Are there any pictures or anything like that you've got that you believe are genuine, or that we know for a fact are genuine?
I think the pronunciation of the other group in Israel is Rephaim. It's not my field, it's not my area, so I'm sure our listeners can correct me on that, and I'd welcome that. As for UFOs, I saw one when I was a kid. Therefore, no one can tell me they don't exist. When I was a kid in sort of pre-secondary school in Hampshire, a silvery disc floated over the playground. Everybody saw it. What we did, beautiful and silent. Not a single sound came from this clearly, craft, an aircraft in the sky. Some kids ran off screaming. Some just wanted nothing to do with it. That was the most interesting reaction, I think. I, along with the more robust in the playground, went to demand that a teacher came and saw it. I lost all faith in mainstream education that day, since the teachers wouldn't come out since it was their break time. So a little miracle is happening, but that can go away because it's break time. And when we all went back into class afterwards, we were told that there'd be no talk about UFOs. So I lost all faith in mainstream education that day. Therefore, there's one thing that I know for a fact isn't simply photoshopped. Do I know what I see, what I saw then, what I've seen at that time? No, I don't. It's a UFO. I don't. I do know it measured up to the classic descriptions of a beautiful silvery craft. We saw it. I don't know how many of these photos of Nephilim are faked or not. Certainly, some of them are not very real. But they can do such miracles these days. That on one level, it doesn't matter. I mean, certainly the Smithsonian is up to something, and has admitted that it, like any other major academic institution, only has a certain amount of space. They've actually got rid of bones and skeletons in the past because there was no room for storage. And my dear friend Klaus Donner, who, of course, Project Camelot fame, who I've known for a number of years now, is on a perpetual dig in the Philippines, where he is telling me every few months they've unearthed huge skeletons. He won't tell me how large at the moment, and they've taken photographs, and they've all been impounded by the local authorities. He found some similarly in Ecuador, I believe, a couple of years ago, and on a farmer's estate. The farmer at the back of his estate realised that these were human-like skeletons. They were far too big to call in the police, although he did at one point. And what happened? Everybody decided that yes, they were genuine skeletons of giants. It was a little family or a tiny community buried together, and everybody started suing everybody, and the whole thing is locked under endless writs in law nowadays because there's money involved, there's state prestige involved, there are academic reputations involved. So that tends to be what happens when giantism and giant skeletons come out of the closet. But we're hoping to explore all of it in the conference. I mean, we've got some really, really knowledgeable and wonderful speakers. I mean, we're still carving out your own role, of course, Paul.
Oh, yeah, always. Always happy to help.
Yeah, it can't happen if you're not there. I mean, you're one of the family.
Thank you.
But, I think there are lots of different angles coming into this conference from an acknowledged panel of experts, some of which are looking at pre-biblical materials and looking at the Babylonian stories. And of course, they are absolutely mind-blowing because you get our old friends, the Anunnaki, turning up and what they were trying to do with things that belong to the earth. So, this is a powerful conference full of ideas and perspectives. The one factor that's joining everyone together is that, in fact, something very serious is going on, and an entire swathe of human history is either being ignored or buried, literally, because it doesn't suit certain parties to have it come out into the open.
That was basically where I was going to go with the next question. What do you think the main reason for covering this up? Because in some ways it could validate the Bible more in what it says, or I guess for some people it can't. But what would you say is the biggest reason that they'd want to cover something like this up?
I don't think it's a total cover. I think there are lots of different motives depending on the artifacts in different countries, and there are different views of what it all means. I mean, certainly, excuse me, when it comes to institutes like the Smithsonian, I mean, it's got a rather robust academic reputation, but it's underfunded like everybody else in that world. So I can actually see why unfortunately they're forced to get rid of artifacts. It's not good, but that's the sort of world we live in. I don't believe it's to preserve the Darwinian view of evolution. I mean, that's the main view at the moment. A couple of hundred years ago it wasn't. Maybe it won't be in the future. And certainly Darwin himself is misunderstood because he was a Unitarian. He wasn't an atheist. He didn't go against all of that. I mean, certainly the origin of species was held up by one of his uncles in the pulpit, who was a Unitarian preacher, as a great insight into, how nature works under the Almighty. So I don't think it's that. I think it's a bit of lots of things. And certainly what people don't really want to do at this stage is to admit that there's a supernatural, or admit that there are other higher orders. Even if you're looking at the preternatural, the paranormal. I mean, lots of people, for various reasons, don't want that type of discourse entering back into public debate. And that's where you're looking, I think, at control and manipulation. I mean, it suits various powers to have people thinking about themselves as mere bags of chemistry and nothing more. Don't worry yourself with all these strange and troubling thoughts. I mean, a friend of mine of note, who'd better remain nameless, I brought up the subject of the paranormal actually as an ironic remark, and was told very quickly, "Oh, that's just the way the brain works." To which I couldn't help replying, "Yes, but that's true of everything." There's a lot of chicanery around the powers that be and the vested interests that don't want the boat rocked in any way. I mean, one of the old shows, UFO Hunter, I was told to watch an episode. I don't normally watch TV, but I was told to watch a particular episode by a friend of mine, which I did, because it had a fascinating reaction to a UFO. There was a rich guy on a yacht, and the UFO hunters said, "What did you see?" And the first thing he said was, "I wish I hadn't seen it." That speaks volumes. It says a great deal about what vested interest doesn't want discussed and why. So I don't think it's one overarching conspiracy. I don't believe in it. Well, I'm not the conspiracy boy in this show anyway. That's you, Paul. But, one of the reasons I'm not the conspiracy boy is because I don't believe there's this united effort against something. You have different groups. Human beings conspire. Sadly, that's just what human beings do at this stage of their own evolution. But, they're not unified in that. You have different factions competing for different goals and different results. But, what it suits a very powerful interest at the moment not to have discussed is different histories, alternative world histories, and what it might mean for the human condition itself. If a giant strolled into Oxford Street tomorrow, would it prove the Bible? No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't disprove the Bible, but it wouldn't prove the Bible. That is something to do with faith, and it's something to do with aesthetics and philosophy and theology, and it's something to do with mystical experience, the works of faith. If I don't think, as some of my brothers and sisters in the Bible Belt would say, that it's a conspiracy against the Bible, although of course that does happen too. But what is happening here tends to be, dare I say, international, because if there are similar discoveries in Russia, and one of the speakers at the conference will be talking about them, why is that? Because that was the Soviet Union when these things were discovered. Why would they act in the same way as capitalist Americans? For the simple reason people don't want the boat to be rocked, and they want one type of history, one type of narrative to dominate cultural discourse because it's easier to manipulate and contain. My God, I must become a conspiracy theorist. That sounds like a conspiracy on Uncle David's part. It wasn't meant to be, but yes, I think that certain people find it uncomfortable.
Well, what would be interesting is if they got some of these bones and done a study on the DNA of them, and then see how that DNA related to us. And that alone, I think, could be, in today's day and age where everything, racism and all that is such a politically strong and stuff, I think that could really set a cat among the pigeons. So that's my thoughts on that. I mean, it's certainly when they've dug up mummies and old bodies that have been from European descent, and this has been in the Native American area, so-called a Native American area, or other areas, and all of a sudden they want to stop researching that. And at the end of the day, the way I see it, all history is truth and should be embraced. That's how we learn from it. It doesn't make anything different to what we are today or who we are, but it helps us, show us where we're going. So that's what strikes me about that. But anyway, I mean, sorry, yeah, go on.
To be a bit fair to the historians, I mean, remember they're scholars on a limited resource, on limited resources. Let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. But I think you're right. This thing needs to be extended, not reduced. And of course, history itself is hardly being taught in our schools nowadays. On one level, we needn't worry about giants because the kings and queens of Britain aren't being talked about either.
Yeah.
And all the things that went into the formation of this culture. That is completely beyond me. So we're doomed to make the same mistakes forever then because we can never learn from the past. What is wrong with these people? Was any nation or any group saintly? No. But the point is we can learn from that. As for racism, I mean, it's getting to the stage where it's like the word witch in the Middle Ages. It doesn't actually mean anything.
Right.
But it's a way to undermine your enemies, and the ignorant mob instantly rises to protect the accuser because they've got a series of irrational fears that they want to justify. No, I mean, we're looking at the suppression of knowledge, which the Gnostic part of me would never, ever think is good. And because we're looking at also a suppression of any possible bigger picture in history, which can't lead to any good at all. And of course, the main ideological factor. I'm got tongue-tied today. I'm a bit sort of under the weather. I'm not with COVID. I've just got a bit tired. It's been a very heavy week, and I've got a bit of a sniffle coming on. But nothing serious. Inshallah, as they say. No, what they want to do is suppress alternative views and keep the population sedated so that it doesn't ask any difficult or intriguing questions. That is simply not a good policy for our future as a species, let alone as a nationality.
Yeah. No, it's. I mean, okay. So we've touched on. Excuse me. We've touched on the actual what the conference is going to be about and so on. How about where? So let's go in the details of the actual conference itself, where it's going to be, when it's going to be, and some details on that, so people know what to expect.
Oh, but Teddy, we've had a series of crises on the part of venues which are afraid to say boo to a goose. We were originally going to hold it at the Anthropological Society, which has this gorgeous Art Deco building over near Baker Street, but they I mean, love them to death. I mean, I mean that. They're decent people. They had problems with it. Then they found there was a double booking on the date, which I don't doubt. I mean, to get any venue to agree to anything at the moment is tantamount to miraculous.
Yeah.
So we had to move it on from there. Then we were thinking of the David Game College, which is actually a wonderful venue because, they do, the practical side of the conference. There needs to be refreshments. There need to be toilet breaks. They need the speakers themselves need to be able to present their notes in a professional way. So we were thinking of there, but I don't know, something just didn't gel about that particular venue, though we will consider it in the future, maybe for other things. At the moment, we've seemed to have come to an accord with the Theosophical Society over in Gloucester Place. I mean, not only do they talk about giants, Madame Blavatsky mentions giants, which of course aren't entirely physical. People forget that if you're looking at the different types of earth, which are openly in the theosophical books, they're discussed, and the different types of humanity, some of them are physical creatures, but some are not. Some are still part spiritual and part physical, because spirit is descending into matter. So we wouldn't actually be able to deal with them in any way imaginable, because they're not what we are. I mean, if you're looking at the Lemurians, according to theosophy, they're not completely physical. So, and that raises a whole series of additional questions. But I don't know, that's just sort of to myself and Dan, who of course is the young impresario, founder and curator of Tedx Landmark. We needed an appropriate venue. The Theosophical Society, as usual, stepped up to the mark and said, that sounds like an interesting idea. Let's see what we can do with it. And we are hoping to do this on the 24th of April next year, if everything holds together, with full refreshments and a wonderful list of speakers, including one of my publishers, the esotericist and author Mog Morgan. Excuse me, I'm just about to cough again. Susan Laban, the psychic. I mean, she's currently doing a doctorate. I think it's at one of the universities in Wales, but she's going to all these high-powered lectures in Oxford, which is interesting. Andrew Goff, which, of course, a favourite up-and-coming star of Gaia TV. I'm trying to think of all of them. We've got the Reverend Jim Wilhelmsen, because, of course, this is the rebirth of a conference that was due to take place, I think, in 2013. And the Nephilim managed to put a stop to it then, but they've got a harder fight on their hands this time. Of course, is an evangelical minister a wonderfully ingenious human being. He speaks the ancient languages, the ancient biblical languages. He wrote an incredible book called Beyond Science Fiction, which is well worth a look. We've got Leon Zagami, who will be coming in by live feed. We've got Ra Castaldo, the radio host and author and a New Age specialist on crystals. I can't remember who. I'm sure Dan can fill in the gaps. We certainly got Vladimir Wiedemann, a friend of ours, of course, who was one of the people who used to discuss new anthropologies in Moscow, and those ideas never actually got to the West for various reasons. We've got Alan Cox, a friend of ours, of course, again, Paul, who is going to clean the building of any untoward energies and talk about his new book. Johan Alsted, another friend of ours, a published poet, a rising New Age guru who's going to discuss a weird dream he had about giants. There's also a surprise celebrity guest who I don't want to discuss at the moment for the simple reason it hasn't been finalised, but we're in for a high-powered day with a series of very gifted interlocutors, of contributors. Kicks off at around 11. We may make that a bit earlier if we can. Finishes about 4 or 5. Again, we're solidifying that. It's wise to buy tickets in advance because once people start buying tickets, we're expecting a deluge, and that's why everything is up online now with Eventbrite. So, because the system does it automatically, we needn't worry about it. But we're looking at a day and the possibility of publishing the most interesting papers that are submitted either by the panel or our guests, who feel this subject deserves a great deal more discussion. We're already thinking maybe of a second round in the year after. So 24th of April next year, be there or be square.
Right, and I understand you have also got assistance from the founder of Tedx Landmark, who's there with you now, Daniele Irandust.
As the angels will have it, my dear friend Daniele, of course, as the founder and curator of Tedx Landmark, they have very kindly decided to sponsor this project because they're interested in, the things we are. Human potential, the wonderful, the imaginative, and possibly the absolutely alternative to really awaken, our brain cells and our taste buds and see where we go from there. I'll hand the comm to Daniele now.
Great.
Hello, Paul.
Hi there. Welcome back. How are you doing?
On your show again. Thank you very much. Thank you again for inviting me to be on THA Talks. It's always a great pleasure. And it's one of my favorite shows, I must say.
Oh, that's good. Thank you for saying that. And it's great to have you back on. And I would like to say as well, well done for pulling off the last Tedx Landmark show that you've done this year. Because with the circumstances, I thought you'd absolutely done brilliantly. You pulled it off. It was a really good, enjoyable day, and you carried on the legacy. So well done on that.
Thank you very much, Paul. Well, you were involved in Tedx Landmark, so
I was happy to help. Yeah, thanks.
I really appreciated it, and you did a great job. And by the way, it was very interesting because you were this year. You were our production manager, so you were sort of bringing our speakers to the stage and managing the timing,
making sure they weren't talking too much and forgetting to come to the stage.
Exactly, and I was astonished because you didn't break a sweat once.
Oh, thank you. I try my best. I try to chill out as best I can.
I was very impressed, I must say. But I'm really looking forward to next year's Tedx Landmark event, and I'm hoping that you'll join us.
Absolutely! I'm looking forward to it already. I particularly like the way you branched out with different types of speakers this time as well. So you're sort of looking, and I thought you were quite brave with one or two of them as well, which is respect there. And certainly this conference that Dave and I have been talking about. It just shows how open-minded you are, and it doesn't necessarily mean everyone has to believe everything, but they're happy to give people a stage and listen to what they've got to say, so people can make their own minds up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I think there's a criticism with TED Talks generally that they're sort of mainstream.
Yeah.
They only focus on themes on topics that are are sort of accepted really
Yeah.
by the general public. They don't really look at the alternative, and I think with this year's TEDx Lambeth, we tried to sort of push the boundaries. So we had a talk on anti-feminism
Yeah.
by Elizabeth Hubson. We had a talk on nationalism by Baktigul Makambatova from Kazakhstan. So we were trying to push those boundaries, and when David approached me about the conference on Nephilim anthropology, I thought, if we can't look at those topics through our TEDx platform, because there are regulations, set by TED Talks. So I thought, let's sponsor it then. That's how we can help address those issues and discuss those issues. So I was really interested in the theme. All the speakers. I mean, the speakers are absolutely amazing. I think in total we have 10 speakers for the conference, which is very sort of appropriate and really broad. It's extensive. It's going to allow us to look at different topics from various angles, Nephilim anthropology. So I mean, I'm really looking forward to it. And we've put a huge amount of work into sort of advertising, into the planning. On social media, on Instagram, for instance, we've got 1,000 followers already, and they're commenting on each of our posts every single day, and they're sort of contributing to the discussion. It's really interesting. The number of people who are sort of want to learn more about the Nephilim. Very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that pops up now and again, and a lot of these conspiracies. They just don't go away because they've never really been dismissed. It's okay. Sometimes there's not enough information to make it cast iron history, and this is what's happened. But there's not always enough just to sort of totally dismiss it, and and that in itself makes it more intriguing and leaves it to people's imagination. And there's probably a lot of history. I mean, there's many years that are behind us. Who knows what really happened in a lot of these instances? We can only do our best to work out. And there's a lot of times when when historians and archaeologists have just done their best to try and work out what's happened, and if they find things, how long it's been, how old this is, how old that is. But they correct themselves a lot as well. So we're not always right. We can only do our best. And there's a lot of mystery behind us. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as you know, I've started a doctoral program, a course at King's College London, and I'm doing my research is on the oversight of the intelligence agencies in the UK. So I'm looking at the democratic elements of espionage, spying. And intelligence studies, the field that I'm working in, is probably the closest field to conspiracy theories. And it's astonishing because, I studied intelligence studies in Aberystwyth University for my undergraduate and postgraduate degrees. And there wasn't a single lecture where they discussed conspiracy theories. And I thought that was astonishing. So why are they, why are they stopping students from looking at these issues? And I knew, at the time, lots of students talked about conspiracy theories, but none of the lecturers wanted to discuss them, which I thought was a bit sort of suspicious. Why are they doing that?
Well, yeah.
And,
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, I mean, sort of. That's why I think it's important for us to look at these sort of alternative fields. That's the only way that we can actually get to the truth, not by ignoring them, but by discussing them. And I think that's why the conference is actually very important towards that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think for me, a lot of this is really getting conspiratorial, is I think a lot of these conspiracies, the big ones that come out, are actually, it wouldn't surprise me that they're put out to muddy the waters. If there's a conspiracy there, the best way to cover it up is to throw another 5 conspiracies out there that are crazy, believable, but crazy, and they can be debunked. And then it's easy to dismiss them, you know? I find, because for a while I got into the flat earth. I didn't get into it. I just looked at it and tried to open my mind to it. And there's certain parts of science that are talked about, and it does make you think, certain contradictions in science, and probably some stuff that they haven't got an answer for, or they've got to question their beliefs in it just in science. That's a good question, yada yada. But then you can prove that the Earth is round, and I mean, there's probably some flat earthers there going to teach me otherwise. But the thing is, what it does is it means that these conspiracies pull in a lot of smart people, and then you debunk them. And then when someone says something that is true, a real conspiracy, you're just a loony again. You know, it's that's what I believe. I think that's why there's so many out there at the moment, is because there are real, genuine conspiracies out there, and the best way to not have to answer to them is to smear conspiracy theories in general and make it a movement that is just laughable. And like you say, professionals don't want to touch because it can damage their careers, or they're just afraid of what people think about them. And that's a bad state to be in, because it means any conspiracy that does come up, it's got free reins, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And you mentioned the flat Earth. You know, there was actually a couple of years ago in Texas, I believe, there was a convention on flat Earth.
Yeah.
And it was a very successful event. And a couple of years ago, there were a few flat Earth conventions in the UK, which I sort of researched when we were thinking of our convention on Nephilim Anthropology, and there is lots of interest. You know, what we're planning to do with this conference is actually to have workshops as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, maybe not in this year's event, but in future events, we're even planning to, you know, actual skeletons, you know, giant skeletons in our venue. I believe there are a couple of companies that are sort of looking into that area. So, you know, it's not like it's not a sort of an isolated field. There are lots of conferences on these topics, and there's a huge amount of interest, which is very interesting. And you know what? In the American one, Paul Logan turned up. As you know, he's a YouTuber, very famous YouTuber. So when David mentioned a celebrity guest, we are going to have a very important sort of celebrity as well. So
that sounds interesting. Yeah, and he ended up having a professional boxing bout with the other guy, YouTuber. I can't remember his name now, but yeah, it's. I think he went to the conference to Flat Earth just to take the mick out of them, basically. Which, to be honest, I don't like seeing. I don't like it when people mock it, because, as I said, when I look at the Flat Earth conspiracy, there is a lot of stuff they bring up that makes it. For a while, I kind of sat back and thought, "No, you're kidding me. This can't be real." And the only thing that kind of stopped me from going all the way was there was no real evidence that really proved how the sun rotates and the stars efficiently for me, and that was the showbreaker for me. I haven't heard enough evidence in that area to convince me that the world we're living in is flat. But other areas, if it wasn't for that, I would have been pulled in myself. You know, that there's some scientific and that in itself is a conspiracy. Let's get some scientists answer some of these questions they're raising, because it really is interesting. It's generally interesting, and I don't think people should always mock these things, because there is. Even if you might prove that it's not true, you can still learn a lot from it. And a lot of these people, the only reason a lot of people are getting sucked into conspiracies is because they're opening their minds, because there's so much lies and disinfo about at the moment. At least they're taking that leap and opening their minds. It's very easy to be closed-minded. We can all be closed-minded and not make mistakes. But, you know, so I think if people want to go and ask questions and disagree, do it. But this mocking, and that it comes across as very sort of crass and a bit arrogant, I don't like to see it. But I'm sure that's not what you've got coming to the show anyway. So I was just mentioning that about the Flat Earth conference you referenced.
Definitely, yes. Yeah. I mean, what we're planning to do with this conference is actually have we have 3 tiers, you know, ticketing tiers. And what we're trying to do with those is encourage people to come to our conferences actually and debate. So, VIP tickets, they can actually submit papers. So if anyone has written a paper about the Nephilim, perhaps the anthropology of the Nephilim, or ufology, alienology, are they aliens? We're actually accepting our panel of experts. They're accepting papers, and we're going to have judges sitting on our panel to see if they can be published. There are a couple of journals that we're looking at. One is Leo Zagami's journal website. We've also got Alan Cox's podcast. So there's an opportunity to speak on Alan Cox's podcast if the paper is accepted. So it's a very sort of a very inclusive conference where people will have the opportunity to engage with the material. So it's not like going to a lecture, sitting there, taking notes. I mean, that's good in itself, but I think we've gone a bit further than that. I think lots of people will find that sort of beneficial for them as well.
Yeah,
it's a two-way process, basically.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, certainly it sounds interesting, and the website that you can go to reserve tickets is NACON 2021. So I'll say that as it is NACON 2021.evanbright.co.uk. And that's what's up at the moment. If people want to bookmark that page and keep updated about venues and so on, that's probably the best thing to do. Mr. Parry, have you got anything you'd like to add?
Reverend.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
I knew you long before then, mate.
Actually, you didn't. I was a minister years ago.
Yeah. I think I met you just as you finished up with the first your first experience.
Oh God, there's a long story. I mean, I'm not at my most eloquent self today. As I say, I feel a bit under the weather. No, I had a congregational church in Shadwell years before I met any of you lot, and actually spent years as a Unitarian lay preacher, because in free church everything takes forever and you've got to work your way towards it. But no, I'm sort of gone back to that after an amazing journey, discovering new brothers and sisters everywhere. So I'm very heathen friendly. I'm very Wiccan friendly. But you have to be true to yourself and the tradition you find yourself in. So there we are. We're looking at an amazing event, Obertelli. We're looking at something groundbreaking. I don't give for all this flat Earth nonsense at all. 3,000 years of mathematics, satellites, the horizon, and all the rest of it really make it look ridiculous. What I do like is the fact that people are inquiring like you, and no one should attack that. That is absolutely astonishingly important in a day like ours, in an era like ours. Curiously, if I'm looking at conspiracy theories, I find the Hollow Earth much more interesting than the Flat Earth, with all sorts of weird and wonderful things going on beneath our feet, and ancient stories, underground cities and rulers and lords and masters, and that would float my boat much more than a Flat Earth. But maybe we'll hold a conference about that. But I think the Nephilim will be the theme, the overarching theme, and the catch-all for discussing the weird and the wonderful, at least for the next couple of years ahead. But the first one that's coming up next year, 2021, will be the groundbreaker, and everybody present will be helping us to establish the parameters of where we go from there. It's a very exciting opportunity.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you coming on to let us know about it, David, and thank you, Daniela, for coming on again. It's really nice catching up with you as well. I mean, I'm certainly looking forward to it, and I guess because of the experience with working with Daniela for the Tedx talk this year, if we're still in prison with these ridiculous restrictions at the time you're doing this conference, I guess you'll have a bit of experience on how to pull it off, and that's something to make the event a little bit more secure. You've done it once, you can do it again.
Well, I mean, don't forget we bucked the trend. Not only did we hold a Tedx Landmark show this year when all of the others had closed down, we also opened my new church, Valentine's Hall, in Belham, South London.
Yeah, that's another.
Where there's a will, there's a way. And if we're forced to go online, we'll go online as a preparation for the actual real-time event. This is not going to be stopped. It's a time for questions. It's a time to speculate about what the truth actually is, because it is out there, as they used to say in the X-Files, and let's go and try and find some, because if ever it was needed in the history of the human race, it's needed now.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm really looking forward to it. Is there anything you'd like to add, because we are around about that time, to wrap it up? Daniele, is there anything you'd like to add? David, the floor is for you guys.
Everyone, you're welcome to come. That's it.
Paul Logan, get your ass into gear and visit our show, and you get a bunch of fives if you come with a mocking attitude.
Right.
Listeners, Paul Obertelli is probably going to be my Nephilim for the day, so you'll be able to see him stark naked and painted blue. What more do you want for your money? No, this is an
I'll be the mascot.
Well, you've got the figure of a Nephilim. I don't even know what that means yet, but you look like a Nephilim, and a nice one. Don't worry, a nice one. No, we've got some wonderful things planned. Obviously, the lockdown is slowing everything down, but it's not halting everything, and it's not stopping everything. So, full steam ahead, and let's see where we can go from here.
Excellent. Well, thank you both for coming on, and thank you to everyone for tuning in and listening. I'll be back soon, hopefully sooner than that big layoff that I had, which I still feel bad about. Got to crack on. There's too much stuff to talk about, as we've seen today. And obviously, as I said earlier, over the coming weeks, we've got some exciting things going on in this world. That's the best way to look at it anyway. Thanks, guys. And until the next time, I'll be seeing you soon.